Well, I think my happiest memory of Main Street is above what is now Ray's Plumbing and Heating, the Oddfellows Hall. On certain nights and certain times, my father and mother would take me, and we would all go to the dance up there. It was the Oddfellows dance, and I was young, but then so were the other children, because the mothers and fathers danced. They did everything from the grand march to the polkas, to the square dances, to the round dances, to the circle dances. But what we children got to do was learn how to dance. And we did not usually dance, we didn't usually dance with each other though. The men saw to it that we were brought out into the dance floor and taught.
It's a very friendly town. Yeah, it is that is one of the things I've lived in a lot of towns, some 30-some towns in Iowa over my period of time.
What are you doing?
Well, some of us are doing a video for the library about Main Street.
Well, that sounds like we're going to be on Good Morning America or something. You want me to say Good Morning America?
I told you we were going to do lunch. Yeah. We walked out, I said, let's go do lunch.
My impression of Main Street when I was growing up was just the one street from the highway up to the courthouse and the businesses on that street.
Well, I think Main Street is the hub of Pocahontas.
Main Street is the street that was platted as Beulah Avenue.
Right.
And Beulah was Warwick Price's wife. And Warwick Price was the person who platted the city of Pocahontas back in 1870.
Plans were that the courthouse would be the center of the town. You had those 4 streets going out to make the hub. But actually, Main Street, from then until the present time, is from the courthouse down to the highway, and you almost might say a block each side. You'd get in a kind of a battle if you didn't define Main Street as including those business places that were not exactly on Main Street.
I remember whenever we have a parade in town, homecoming parade, Heritage Days, the parade swings through Main Street because
That's good.
it's, it's where people gather, and a lot of people associate togetherness or gathering on Main Street. I remember as a kid, we'd say, well, I meet you on Main Street, and we'll go to the dime store, and then we'll go to the movie.
I'd be out of town for several days for one reason or another, and we'd always come back and make a pass up through Main Street before driving out home, but see what changes there were, because invariably there'd be some change.
Remember before it was paved, because it was just plain mud. When it rained, it was just sloppy mud, and from one side of the street to the other.
I recall my dad telling me about when Main Street was paved, and I know my dad and my Uncle Rodney had their law office in the building that Denny Fitzgerald currently owns, and there was quite a celebration that night, and my dad was concerned about the building, the safety of the building, so he remembers having come down and stayed in the building all night, slept in the building. The people were carrying on, and they were running skyrockets down the curb. It needed a place to shoot those, and they would shoot them along the curb, and the building didn't burn, of course, but he remembers that.
Main Street here used to be a parking lane up the middle of Main Street.
Right.
You were one-way traffic, one-lane traffic, I guess you'd say. Another little incident, a history of the town was when I came here, the street lighting was a matter of wire stretched from one side of the street across with some 40 or 60 watt bulbs on it and the like.
And the Cozy Cafe was a favorite place for people to gather for coffee in the north part of the district, north part of the Main Street. And we called it the theater district up there. We said we were different from those people down at Wall Street between the banks. And a different type of people and character, but a group would gather quite often in the morning and again in the afternoon for coffee. The people that were employed in this area and some of the courthouse people. It was a very popular place. And of course the Ideal Cafe was always also flourished throughout all this and is still flourishing and a very popular place.
Did they have cruising in the older ages?
You mean scooping the loop?
Yeah, yeah. Would you? Do you
Oh,
know?
they've always done that. Well, there wasn't much else to do in Pocahontas but to drive up and down Main Street and make a Louis up there.
Sure. Now, did they call it making a Louis
Yeah.
30, 40 years ago too?
Yeah.
But the cruising you're talking about is just going up and down Main Street. From the, we would go up to the courthouse square, turn around right there, and we'd go all the way to south part of town. And we used to turn before we got to the highway and just turn on the highway. Well, then the police didn't like the fact that the people were making these U-turns in the middle of the street. So then they put up signs that said no U-turn. So to get around that, what we would do is we would go into the co-op parking lot entryway where they bring the grain trucks in, and we'd just drive around their gas pumps and go back down. Then sometime in high school, I think, then the police put up no U-turns at this end of Main Street. And they used to, I think they ticketed people for making U-turns. But, you know, I don't think that sign ever deterred any of us from making U-turns. Because, see, nobody wanted to go all the way around the courthouse square to go back down Main Street.
And everybody knows what a Louis is. It's just to make a U-turn up by the courthouse. You'd head back down, and again at the stoplight, and then you'd go down almost to the south end of Main Street. The next stop was always the bowling alley. And to get to the bowling alley, you had to go that diagonal that's no longer there, but it was by the gas stations. So you take a left on the diagonal, stop, look, and head out to the bowling alley.
And it was a 63, I'm sorry, it was a 63 that Dad got in 1970, and that's the year I turned 16. And he got this car about a week or so after my birthday. And this was going to be kind of my car, you know, a family car, but Carol would be allowed. And it had one of those knobs on the steering wheel, you know, so you could turn the wheel like this. And that winter, I was in Madrigal in the high school choir. Our music teacher decided that we should go caroling. So I volunteered to take all the girls. So we had 4 girls in the front seat and 4 girls in the back seat. And we were going to go caroling to all the faculty. Well, the roads were a little icy, which made it all the more fun in my little Mercury Comet because the tires on my car were just as bald as glass. And we were cruising in between going caroling, and I took the corner too fast. And with that little knob on my steering wheel, I spun my steering wheel around, and we did a complete 360. And the reason it was so funny is because the altos all laughed, but the sopranos screamed, "Oh!" You know? And to this day, alto, I've realized in my adult life that altos are a lot more fun than sopranos.
Before I went to college, I played the piano for silent movies when I was in the 10th grade. It was on the side street, probably about where the lock shop is. The old theater was down there someplace. Got a cue sheet for every movie, and so the piano was up. There was sort of a snow fence back of the piano, and I was only in the 10th grade when I started to do that. And kids used to throw popcorn and stuff over the snow fence at me. If it was a spooky show, you just played sort of spooky music. And if it was a Western, you know, you played Paul Revere's Riot or something. And the cue sheet told you about the kind of music you should have. And every show at that time, well, like Ramona, you know, there was a song, Ramona, there was a theme song for almost every show. So you always had to have the theme song. Everybody came to the movies. They didn't have televisions at that time, you know, and it only cost a quarter or 35 cents. Now it's $3 or $4, I guess. But there were no televisions. And then one night a week there was a family night where the whole family would get in, you know, for $1 maybe. I got 2 silver dollars every night. And I worked, well, if they had an orchestra on Sunday night, I sure did something else, but I worked every night. I worked for Harry Pace, and then when Harry Pace left, Jack Bauma came, so I worked for Jack for quite a while.
Sometimes I had a nickel and could go to the movies, and if it was anything I loved to do, it was to see the cowboy artist that was playing on Saturday night at the movies, whoever he happened to be, for my nickel. But it was really special if it was a Shirley Temple movie. That was the crowning thrill of the year, once a year. The theater was down where the lock shop is now at that time. And we would be completely crowded in one big clump of kids.
I remember one thing about Jack Bowman's theater, that you did not take any popcorn or any candy bars in to eat. He watched, and if you saw a bulge in your pocket, why, you reached in and got it out.
I went to Old Yeller. As a family, we went to Old Yeller. That's the only movie I can recall going to, except Christmas. When Santa Claus came to town, now there was some fun. We would go, I don't know, everybody went uptown because Santa Claus was there. There was the big shopping times. And they farmed the kids out to the theater. And it was great because it was all cartoons. You know, it seemed like all afternoon. I don't know how long they were in there, but it was probably an hour or so was all it was, but it did seem like it was all afternoon. It was just wonderful. Then when you came out, you got a sack of candy, popcorn, or candy and peanuts and an apple or something like that from the businessman uptown is where it came from, I guess.
Sacks of peanuts. I got sick once off eating too many peanuts. You know, you go through the line once and then you go back and then you go through it again. And I got sick that afternoon. I remember that too. Throw the apples in the garbage and just eat all the peanuts and candy.
I remember one time I went with my mom, and we went to the movie called Joy in the Morning. Richard Chamberlain and Yvette Mimieux. And the opening scene of the movie are these teenagers kissing in a corner. And my mom turned and said, "I may have to take you home." And I turned back and I said, "Oh, I don't think so, Mom. It'll be okay. It'll be okay."
Eavesdropping. Rose Forey was the
she was
operator
a junior
in the old telephone office was up over Ronnick's, wasn't it? Ronnick's Opera
right
House?
across the street here.
Yeah.
I was teaching in town south of here, and they had we ring it, call them, so we ring up the operator and say, "Hey, Mert, we're going to have a band concert tonight. Would you let everybody know?" Sure. So she'd ring all the lines up. We're got a band concert tonight.
Yeah.
Could you talk to everybody at the same time?
Well, she just ring the line ring and stick everybody on that line.
Oh, and then you ran to the phone.
Before natural gas and other fuel oils, heating became so popular that the lumber yard would get in a carload or two of coal. Then the operator would ring this general ring over all the farm lines and as well in town to tell them as a coal. Then everybody who needed coal would be in there. They shoveled off the coal that they needed off the car right onto their own wagon.
First in practice, I called Palmer to get somebody, and I think Mrs. or Helen Malm, I think, was the
She could be.
Yeah, she was
operator
yeah.
for Palmer. And so I asked about to ring up a certain number, and rather than ring it up, she says, "Well, Jim, I just saw him go across the street." She was looking out the window of the telephone. She said, "I'll catch him when he hits the cafe or something." That's personal service.
When I was a young boy in Fonda, I know that Ruth Sauter was our operator. You know Ruth Sauter.
Yeah.
And if you'd be up in the telephone office and there might be a call come in, trying to locate somebody down that maybe didn't have a telephone, she'd give you a nickel or dime if you go down and get this gentleman or lady and get him to a phone somewhere.
I also remember the wonderful day when the war was over. The war was over, and out on the rural area, the country ring came. You know that ring, the general ring? That meant everybody pick up your telephones. We have an announcement to tell you that the war is over and that there's going to be a dance on Main Street in town tonight, and that was a very exciting time.
The Memorial Day has always been celebrated in Pocahontas. They've changed the method of celebration. Years ago, we always met at the high school, the first thing in the morning, maybe 9 or 9:30. And the American Legion would have a color guard and some fellows in uniform that would march. The high school band was always there. We'd always have a speaker from out of town that came in and spoke as a regular Memorial Day service in the gymnasium of our school. And then, as soon as that program perhaps could take an hour, and the band would play, they would recite Flanders Field and Gettysburg Address, and then they would march from the school out to the cemeteries. And at the cemeteries, they would decorate the graves. And they would have the same program. Maybe they would, one year they would be in the Calvary Cemetery first, and they go across to Summit Hill. Next year they go Summit Hill first, then Calvary. And they would always stop at the bridge across Highway 3 and in honor of the veterans in the Navy. They would stop and we would deposit in the waters a wreath with poppies and so forth in memory of the persons who were departed at sea. And the firing squad would shoot a volley of shots. We would then go on to the cemetery, and people would go out there, and it got to the point where more people would be out at the cemetery waiting for that ceremony and looking at graves and so forth, reminiscing with family members, and then the crowd at the school was dropping off. And so we changed the program to provide nothing at the school unless the weather was bad. Now, we'd ride in cars out to by the bridge, and we meet the band there, and the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the Cub Scouts. They've always led the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, and do the same thing.
And I also enjoy the avenue of flags around the courthouse on the days that they're out. They're beautiful. And there are approximately 150 flags. And these are casket flags. These are veterans who have passed away, and the family has donated the flag to the VFW, the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I see names that you recognize, and you were in service with World War II in my case. And I think that there's moments when you wonder, why you made it back and somebody else didn't.
Richard P. McCormick, Al Stokesbury.
This is hysterical, but it was very traumatic for me. I was in the high school band, and I played the drum, the big bass drum and the cymbals in concert band. But when I was in marching band, I always played the cymbals. Well, it was Memorial Day parade, going out to the cemetery, and the big bass drum person was not there. So for the first time in my life, dear old Mr. Grant strapped that big bass drum on my stomach, and away we went marching down the street, and he was just sure that I would be able to do this. And I hated it, but I knew that I had to do it. So valiantly I went marching along, and we came up from the schoolhouse to the corner where the stop sign, not the stop light, is in front of Flynn's and the bank and all that four-way. And I went marching in my little row, right in line, just right where I should be, and all of a sudden my foot hit something. I went over on top of that drum on my stomach. I rolled with the drum down the street and ended up flat on my back with my arms and my legs out and the drum sticking up in the middle. And the front end of the band kept marching, and the back end of the band came all confused and came over to see what to do and what was the matter. And they got me up, and I kept marching right on down the street because I was all right. I was in hopes I had died, but I didn't, unfortunately. So we went marching on down the street, and we went to the cemetery and did all the playing and everything we were supposed to do. And at the end of the parade, I went back to the car, and my mother just yelled at me, like everything. Darling, what in the world did you get into? The whole back of your coat was all dirty, and I was just embarrassed to tears. And of course, she had been out at the cemetery waiting for the band, and she didn't know of my calamity on Main Street.
We prefer the towns, less than 10,000 population. And so when we looked at Pocahontas, we said, yes, county seat town, that's a good sign. So we looked at that, and we like the size of that type of community. We like the small town atmosphere. We both grew up in small towns. It's a simpler form of life. There isn't as much hustle and bustle. There isn't as much crime.
I like the freedom of living in a small town. I have a lot of friends. I mean, when I first came back, I was constantly comparing myself to all my law school friends who stayed in Minneapolis or who went to work for the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. And they had all these glamorous jobs, but they were working 7 in the morning till 7 at night, and they didn't have time for golf. They didn't have time to sing in a church choir. They didn't have time for any hobbies or anything like that. They're putting in their time for the law firm, and they had to have those 100 billable hours per week, and if you didn't have your billable hours, you don't get paid.
Say the athletic banquet that night, you know, we'll get some boy comes in at 4:30 and we close at 5 and needs a pair of pants, and being a smaller store, you just can't carry every single size of inseam to relate to every leg length. So we have the convenience of being able to shorten a pair of pants in 10 minutes or less, depending on the difficulty. We like to figure 6 to 7 minutes, but I'll exaggerate a little less and go to 10 minutes. But I know a lot of times where I've saved people when they've needed a suit for a wedding or a funeral, and was able to take care of them in short order, I should say.
I have to speak in terms of a county, not just Pocahontas, because I think communication like it is, and everybody being so mobile, that we should talk countywide. We have good people and good work ethic and good moral values, but we need attitude adjustment. We need, I don't mean a drink like some call it, I mean we need to have a strong positive attitude toward things, not a negative thing. I think we can accomplish whatever you set out to do by having an appropriate attitude and work together. And this is the way many of the things that came about being in Pocahontas, like our swimming pool, our golf course, the improvements in our community, our new airport. It became, our hospital is an excellent example because people had faith in the community and they had the attitude to go with it, to support it.
I think one of the fun things about going down Main Street in Pocahontas is as I bop around, everybody talks to everybody. They all stop and they all chatter. And my grandchildren, when they come from far away, come back and go down and they'll say, "Grandma, do you know everybody in town?" And I say, "Yes, I know them by face, not necessarily by name." And the other thing that they are very surprised at is as I walk down Main Street, I'll say to them, "Well, that was your cousin. That was your cousin Joni. That was your cousin Steve. That was your cousin so-and-so," all the way down Main Street. And that's the fun thing. Everybody talks to everybody.
Remember we did this at the supper club?
We did this when she was Stayskull and I was still Hudson. We just know the
I
course.
really can't sing. I really can't.
You just,
I'll
you
just-
always corrected me if I pronounced it wrong.
Hey, how about everybody? There's a lot of people that know how to sing.
Albert
it.
knows it.
Everybody else sing it too. Come on.
Start over again, please. Svesky.
Dana Shiali.
Svesky Janus Skandelidam, Janus Skandelidam, me Butchie, me Polly, Svesky Sebalier, Janus Skandelidam, Janus Skandelidam, me Butchie, me Polly. Yeah, I know.